It seems that Admech have hit the competitive scene hard, last weekend not taking just one, but 3 different grand tournament wins. Let's take a look at the lists and why they've been performing so strongly. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where today we're talking about Admech army lists, and in particular the ones that have been having a lot of success at tournaments. Now when the new codex for Adeptus Mechanicus dropped, it appeared that they did have some incredibly strong combos, and a few of the units in the book in particular have some absolutely devastating firepower. It does appear that the army is easily strong enough to take down tournaments, and what's interesting are the similarities between the lists that have won the events. They all revolve around the Forge World Lucius, and mostly deploy very similar armies to each other. So let's go through the 3 lists one by one, talk about the Lucius Forge World, and the different unit choices in the list, and why they're so good. So first up we come to Waaagh GT, a list created by Nick Anzalatos, and sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. This one's made from a Lucius battalion and an Outrider detachment. Now the Forge World Lucius has lots of reasons to take it. Perhaps the biggest synergy is with the Ranger and Vanguard blobs. You can now take them in 20-man troops choices, they have devastating firepower with their own stratagems, but perhaps one of the biggest issues is getting them in optimal strike range of the enemy units. All the firepower in the world doesn't necessarily help you unless you can get line of sight on your targets. Lucius fixes this by having a 1 command point stratagem to put a unit in deep strike, and they also have their relic the Solar Flare, which is basically like an Admech Veil of Darkness. A character and a nearby unit can teleport across the board, potentially even giving you a turn 1 deep strike alpha strike with one of these units. If you have the Rangers, they could be spitting out 80 strength 4 AP-1 shots, which can put additional buffs on. They can double their firepower with a stratagem. Or the Skitarii Vanguard, which can have an auto wound on 4+ stratagem, meaning that against any non-vehicle target, on average they'll stack about 30 saves on that target. They're really good at killing non-vehicle really tough things, Mortarion being a prime example. It doesn't end there though from Lucius, it also gives them an extra 3-inch range, not loads, but makes them just a little bit easier to use, and it makes them particularly resistant to damage 1 weapons, the exact weapons that you want to be firing at these blobs, as it gives you +1 save against any damage 1 attacks, a lot more resistant to shooting, but also far more resistant to incidental close combat. Say for example, you get hit by a standard Space Marine in close combat, you'll be saving his attacks on 3s. Basically, Lucius is just amazing with these big blobs of Skitarii foot troops. In Nick's list we have 3 of them, a unit of 20 Rangers and 2 units of Skitarii Vanguard, all with an Omnispex for ignores cover and a data tether which allows them to receive certain martial buffs from all the way across the board. To lead them we have a cast of 4 characters, 2 of the new Skitarii Marshals, cheap reroll 1s to wounds, and they bear some nice relics and buffs. The first has the Raiment of the Technomartyr, it gives them a 5+ feel no pain save, and 1 unit nearby can ignore any hit roll or ballistic skill modifiers, quite handy for advancing Vanguard or moving Rangers. And the 5-point telemetry cache, that's an upgrade that gives a unit nearby light cover, a nice durability boost, and potentially even more if they're within a terrain feature. The next Marshal has Exemplar's Eternity, the relic that gives him both a reroll 1 to hit and wound aura, and also programs Retreat, allowing 1 unit on the board to fall back and shoot. Really powerful on these big units, meaning that you know that you can't lock the entire army in close combat and shut down its shooting. Both of the Marshals can also help certain units counteract the effect of Doctrina Imperatives. Next we have 2 Tech Priest Manipuluses. These will add an extra 6-inch of range to 1 unit and add an extra AP of -1. They're particularly handy with Skitarii Vanguard, who don't get any AP to start with. The first has the Logi Holy Order trait. That's the one that allows 1 unit to ignore AP-1 and AP-2, again making them particularly tough, particularly combined with Lucius. He also has the Solar Flare, that teleporting one, to allow him to jump round the board with 1 unit of the big blobs. And the other one takes the Artisan's Holy Order ability. That's another ability to allow you to fall back and shoot, though you could potentially move on to the advanced parts, which can be another shooting buff, adding +1 to your strength. Both of those Holy Orders also give you a discounted stratagem. That second Manipulus also takes the Luminescent Blessings trait. This one's the Lucius specific Warlord trait, and it basically gives 1 core unit transhuman physiology to enemy attacks. This is incredibly good on a toughness 3 unit, as almost everything would have been wounding them on a 3+ or better, so making your Skitarii only able to be wounded on a 4 is really nice. You could potentially even use this on the Iron Striders as well. That'll make them very hard to shift even with dedicated anti-tank fire. There are then a few utility units, a couple of units of Cerberus Raiders, one unit of 3 and one unit of 9. Pretty handy for screening out the board as they can have a pre-game move, and the unit of 9 could really help Fox melee armies as they have their great Tactica Obliqua stratagem to allow them to fall back when they're charged, so the enemy will really struggle to make it into combat with them. The big unit of 9 also has an enhanced data tether to allow them to receive some of the martial buffs if they need them. There's then a unit of 10 sterilizers, the flamer-wielding Tabaxi unit. Technically rules as written at the moment, they can jump on and off the board with a stratagem and never stay on the board to be shot at. Something that I think is an oversight by Games Workshop and is almost certainly going to get fixed. I'm not sure if sterilizers were played this way at the tournament or not. It would be rules as written correct at the moment, though it doesn't seem intentional. In any case, they're fast moving, can stack a whole load of anti-infantry damage on enemy units, and can potentially have some nasty tricks such as using their deeply sunk talents to stop enemy units from falling back. Finally, the list is all backed up by some of the best firepower in 40k at the moment, 2 huge units of the Iron Strider Ballistari, one with 6 twin Cognis las cannons, that single unit being almost a quarter of the entire list's points, but 12 damage D3 plus 3 shots is going to do a lot of work. I'd guess that they hang out with a Scutari Marshal with Exemplar's Eternity. Finally, for a bit more generalist firepower, there's a unit with 5 twin autocannons. A hail of 30 strength 7 damage 2 shots certainly isn't something that most enemy units are going to want to take. Overall, plenty of nasty tricks here, an enormous amount of damage output, some Scutari units that can be insanely durable here, and the potential to deep strike a unit or 2 if needed. Just the sheer amount of firepower from these Admech lists is going to be absolutely terrifying to all manner of armies. In any case, very cool to see what the new Admech can do, and congrats on the GT win. The second of the 3 lists comes from Adrian Phillips of Tabletop Titans, a pretty awesome YouTube channel who do some top tier battle reports. I'm not sure if they're going to feature the Admech army at some point in the future on the channel, but if you're interested, it's certainly worth keeping an eye on. In any case, Adrian used the list to win the Hammerhead 40k Major, and this time it's a single Lucius battalion. The core Scutari component of the list is really quite similar, only 3 characters this time, a Marshal and 2 Manipulus priests. They basically all have the exact same buffs in play, the options for falling back and shooting, and the one Manipulus with Logi and Luminescent Blessings that can make one of the Scutari blobs almost impossible to shift, being only wounded on a 4+, and ignoring AP -1 and 2. There are 4 20-strong units of Scutari this time, an extra unit of Rangers compared with the last one, and one of the Ranger units bears the Fire Point Telemetry buff, the one for granting a unit cover. They all take the standard data tethers and omnispexes, but there's a bit of variation here. 2 of the Ranger units take arc rifles, and the Alphas also have power swords. Doesn't really hurt too much to me to have a little bit more melee threat in those big melee blobs, they already do the shooting very well. This time for the screening and utility units, we have 3 units of Scutari Infiltrators instead of the Cerberus. Infiltrators do seem to be a feature in a lot of the Admech comp lists I've been seeing. They've got forward deployment for some early objectives, actions and screening, provide a little bit of melee threat, and they're not all that easy to kill either due to their artisan bionics giving them a 5+ invul. There's then a nice utility unit of sterilizers, 2 units of Iron Striders with the twin Cognis las cannons, and maybe the most interesting feature of the list, a unit of 10 Fulgurite Electro Priests in a Dune Rider, providing the army with a seriously powerful melee threat to back up all that shooting with, and meaning the opponent has got to be at least somewhat wary of melee. I feel like the priests are quite fragile once they're exposed, but they do hit insanely hard, and they do have a helpful stratagem to make one enemy unit fight last that they're in engagement range with. I feel like in Admech the melee units maybe aren't quite as points efficient as the shooting ones, but to be honest, paying a small premium isn't all that bad to add a really powerful melee threat to an otherwise great ranged army. In any case, another interesting list, a pretty awesome achievement taking on an event with over 60 players in it, and feel free to check out Tabletop Titans, they produce some really good stuff. Finally, last but by no means least, we have Ryan Lynn's list that took the Boise Cupe. This one again pure Lucius, and 2 Lucius patrols this time. Again, the core of the list is pretty much the same. Again, we've got 1 Marshal and 2 Manipuli, and for the Scutari troops we have 40 Rangers and 20 Vanguard, going fairly heavy on the special weapons this time, 2 arc weapons in the Ranger units, and 2 Plasma Calivers with the Vanguard. Most of the buffs are very similar to the previous 2 lists. The only one that we haven't seen mentioned before is the Battlesphere uplink. That's a Warlord trait given to one of the Ranger units, and it's the one that allows one unit to move and shoot for no penalty, whether that's with heavy weapons or assault weapons. Basically means they can stay mobile and still keep on plugging away with those galvanic rifles. For the utility units, we have 2 units of infiltrators and 1 big unit of 10 sterilizers, just the 1 unit of Iron Striders this time, 5 of them with twin Cognis las cannons, and then this list has chosen to deploy the planes en masse, and we have 3 Archaeopter Fusiliers with the chaff launchers. I've already talked a little bit about Fusiliers in that flyer video I made the other week, where we touched briefly on basically every flyer in Warhammer 40k, but Fusiliers are just a really efficient flyer and might be one of the best in the entire game. They've got maximal mobility, being able to pivot 180 degrees in the air before flying if they need to, have a powerful bomb that's going to usually deliver between 3 and 5 mortal wounds in damage, and a flurry of heavy stubber shots to grind away at infantry. They can also shut down enemy auras, use the seismic bomb options to slow down an enemy unit, and auto-explode when they die. There's a lot to like about them, and they're very efficient indeed. There is also an interesting interaction with the Lucius Forge World and their chaff launchers. Basically, the chaff launchers can reduce the incoming damage of a shot by 1, maybe reducing a damage 2 shot to a damage 1. Then potentially Lucius can get the +1 save against the damage 1 shots, meaning that damage 2 firepower is just going to be really hard to remove these guys. I'm not 100% sure if that was how it was played in the tournament, and I think there might be a little bit of debate as to the sequencing of the rule, but as far as I can tell, I suspect that it does seem like it works at the moment, as there's a rare rule in the latest chapter approved book which says that you apply modifiers before doing any changes to the saves and things based on the defensive abilities. So potentially with those chaff launchers you have some incredibly tough Archaeopters winging around, and hopefully should be a real thorn in the opponent's side all game long. So overall I think it's kind of interesting just how convergent all these lists are. A few elements are different, but the core is absolutely the same. It's interesting to see absolutely no Forge Worlds in use aside from Lucius. It certainly seems like one of the strongest Forge Worlds out there to me, though I'm surprised that we haven't seen at least a few other people trying out things like Mars, or maybe even some of the custom Forge Worlds. Probably just a little bit concerning as well that we're seeing Admech sweep to victory in so many different tournaments already. Kind of implies that they are very strong, probably on a similar sort of level to Drukhari, though it does seem that at the moment there's sort of similar kind of win percentages for both Drukhari and Admech. It'll be interesting to see if the Tech Priests oust the Dark Eldar as potentially one of the strongest armies to beat in all of 9th edition. So let me know what you think of the lists down in the comments below. Look forward to hearing what you have to say, or any insights that you have as to how they were played in the actual events. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the 40k videos coming, with new videos out pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention one way that you can help support it, and that's my Element Games affiliate link, which you can find down in the video description. Element Games is a UK-based discount retailer with around 10 to 20% off Games Workshop's models, and if you buy anything after clicking on that link, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics without costing you any more whatsoever. Can just be a way to help out and support the channel if you were thinking about buying something anyway. For people over in the USA and Canada, I do also have an Amazon link as well. That works in much the same way. Click the link, literally buy anything off Amazon whatsoever, and a small amount goes to help support the channel. Could just be something to consider if you do happen to buy something on there anyway. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.